South East and London region first Thursday networking event. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm the treasurer of the combined regions. So you probably know that we champion fundraising to the highest possible standards, and we promote fundraising by organising events like this, and training and mentoring. We do lots of really amazing things for fundraisers in the home counties and Greater London. Who's a member of the Institute of Fundraising? Most people, that's great. Any of you that aren't, you'd be delighted to know that it's only £8.67 a month. And for that, you get a tenner off your ticket that you bought tonight. So we all encourage you to become a member of the Institute as soon as possible. And you can do that by speaking to one of the committee members. They're all volunteers. Can I ask the committee members to make themselves known? Over there by the bar. They're by the bar for future reference. Now, you can follow us on Twitter, and the hashtag for tonight is IOF Thursday, and the various Wi-Fi connections and so on. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Emily Sauls just for a moment to speak about mentoring. Here she comes. Please get a round of applause.
Thanks very much. That's amazing. So the IOF South East and London Committee run a mentoring scheme, which, if you remember, hopefully you've heard about, and if you're not a member, hopefully you'll want to find out about. We've just run our last matching session for this year today, but we will be running 3 sessions again next year, probably around March, June and sort of October time. So if you're interested, then please keep an eye out for information about that in the new year. We always struggle to find enough mentors, so today we had to turn away 10 potential mentees because we didn't have enough mentors. So I would just make a request that those of you who particularly are kind of manager level or above, that you think about your team and how you could develop them by encouraging maybe some of them to think about becoming mentors. The scheme is very much focused on mentees who are very early on in their fundraising career, so have sort of only a year or two's experience, and mentors, we're looking for people who have got sort of 3+ years, up to as many years as you like experience. So even though our next sort of matching session isn't till March, I just wanted to talk about it this evening and at every first Thursday between now and then, just to really put it out there and request that everybody helps spread the word. There's info about it on the South East London part of the IOF website. And yes, if anyone's got any questions this evening, come and find me afterwards. I'm in the bright pink top.
Just to say, I was a mentor on the thing once. It is very well worth it.
Brilliant, thank you. Didn't even know that.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to another of my colleagues, Pasquale, who's going to talk to you about our training scheme.
Hi, with regards to our training, we're really proud at the South East and London region, where we've actually extended our training from 1 training a month to 3, and which has been a great success. On the 27th of November, we will be introducing GDPR to fundraising as well. So we'd like to see more of you there. Also the request and the demand for vulnerability, gift aid as well. So we are going to be introducing even more so on our training every month. So we'd like to see you there. They are posted on our site, on Eventbrite as well. So yeah, it's really, our knowledge, our experiences, we want to share it with you. So we want to see more of you.
Mr. Riley, thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'd like to thank our sponsors now. Our sponsors are so terribly important to us. We wouldn't be able to hold this evening quite the way that we do and make tickets as such good value as they are without our sponsors. So I'd like to thank Eden Brown, and they're well represented here tonight. I'd like all those that represent Eden Brown tonight to make themselves known. More applause. What a great group. And obviously, if you're looking for a change in your career, that would be the place to go. So thank you very much indeed to Eden Brown. Also, Zaffo, who organise online raffles and lotteries, are our other sponsor, who I don't believe are here tonight, but are greatly valued, and we really extend our sincere thanks to them. I'd also like to say that Bring the Story, and they have postcards apparently on your seats, I guess. At the back. Now, if you were to book the event tonight, using the code that's available, you get a 10% discount, so it's well worth doing so tonight if you possibly can. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Eden Brown, to Chris in fact, of Eden Brown, who's going to introduce our speaker tonight. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello, I'll keep this very short because you're not here to listen to me. It is my pleasure to introduce Esther and Malcolm, who I've known now for a while. Malcolm, if I can start with you first of all, thanks very much for coming down. Over 20 years experience in the sector, very unusual approach to fundraising in that he's very much strategic and a relationship-based fundraiser. Takes great pride in building a team, has delivered £1 million gifts, of which he's done 4, I believe. So absolutely fantastic. And Esther, well, she'll hate me saying this, but by far the best senior trust fundraiser that we've managed to secure a job for, we've got at Whizz-Kidz, and what she's achieved has been absolutely brilliant, and I know you're going to hate that, but she's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much both coming down, so can you please give them a very warm reception to Esther.
To say that. Thanks for coming and thanks for inviting us here. We're delighted. So my name's Esther, and I feel like it gave the event maybe a bit of a grand title, Rethinking Trust Fundraising. But it was just to get you guys here. So hopefully we tell you a few things that maybe you already know, but some things that you don't know, and maybe you can take up some tips from the way that we do trust fundraising at Whizz-Kidz. So I've been head of Trust, Statutory and Lottery fundraising at Whizz-Kidz for 2 years, thanks to Chris. And Whizz-Kidz, for those of you who don't know, is a disabled children's charity. So it exists to improve the lives of disabled young people. And a huge part of what they do is providing mobility equipment to young people. And I was really excited to move to Whizz-Kidz, mostly because I remember at my second interview sitting in Whizz-Kidz office and looking through all the pamphlets and the leaflets at wonderful pictures like this and thinking this is going to be an easy gig. And trust funds love to fund capital items, they love to fund children's stuff, and I figured Whizz-Kidz, it's going to be great. You know, we're going to have trusts and foundations biting our hand off to fund us. It wasn't necessarily the experience when I got there. So the income, when I arrived at Whizz-Kidz, the income really showed a different story. What I thought would be a really attractive offer to trusts wasn't necessarily so. The income over 4 years had been slowly declining from our trust and foundation donors. And although we were doing lots of localised and capital asks, we really weren't managing to acquire new donors. We had really good retention, but acquiring new donors was difficult. So after a couple of months of getting to know the team, I could see that there was ways to do things differently, and Malcolm started around the same time as me, and together we looked at some of the gaps that there were in the way that we delivered our trust portfolio. So today we just wanted to explore 2 ends of trust fundraising. We want to look at one end in terms of the high value donors that you might have, and we'll use one example for us of a high value relationship that we had, and how we can apply major donor fundraising techniques to it in order to maximise that relationship. And then secondly, we want to talk about the other end of trust fundraising, those small partnerships that you have, you know, the bread and butter of trust fundraising, and how you can apply individual giving techniques in terms of an acquisition strategy to try to build a stronger warm donor base. So we're going to start with major prospects. I've not done anything exciting, there's no graphs, it's just quotes and pictures. So we're going to start by looking at major prospects and how we can apply relationship management in a major donor way. So when we both started, we obviously, you know, when you start a new job, you take stock of what you've got and you have a look at where the potential opportunities are. And Whizz-Kidz was lucky enough to have secured People's Postcode Lottery as a partner, a 5-year relationship. And so we were receiving £250,000 from Postcode Lottery as standard. And that relationship was just over a year old when I joined the charity. And I'm sure most of you know the potential that PPL offer. They fund unrestricted income and upwards of £1 million a year to many different charities. Yet we were only receiving £250,000 a year, and I felt like there's a relationship where we could push the boundaries and we could make more. But the relationship, having looked at how the relationship had been managed, and obviously relying on handovers and razor's edge notes, I could see that it had suffered from a standard trust approach. And that's not by saying that the team had done anything wrong. They'd applied a very formulaic approach to the relationship because they were kind of classed as a trust. So really there was no proactive effort to engage with the funder. It was really simply annual general touch point based on reporting requirements. PPL, for those of you who don't know, are based in Scotland. The team prior to us arriving had never been to Scotland to meet with the donor, for example. But we could see potential in something and we wanted to make it happen, but seeing potential and making it happen are two entirely different things, and we needed a plan in order to engage them. And rather than continue to apply that trust-style fundraising approach, which is very formulaic and based on reporting and outcomes, we wanted to look at how we could maximise the relationship by actually getting personal with them. And one of the first things we did was look at who held the relationship internally. So that was within the trust team, and we very quickly identified we needed a senior professional involved in it. So Malcolm was our senior who we identified should be involved with PPL, and he's going to talk to you a bit about how we applied an engagement strategy and what we did.
I'll try it without the microphone. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep. Having a quiet voice is not one of my failings. So we're going to talk about PPL for a moment or two, but I wouldn't want you to think...
So sorry.
I wouldn't want you to think this is just something that is applicable to PPL. Chris mentioned earlier on that one of the things I take great pride in is the fact that I've secured personally donations of £1 million from 4 different donors over the course of my career. And these are the same techniques that we've used. There are a menu of techniques, and you can choose different ones according to the funder. But it's really important to actually understand what you're doing right from the start. So apart from Russell, where's Russell gone? He was here somewhere. So apart from Dogs Trust, who I know, who else in this room knows PPL? Who else gets money from PPL? So about 5 of you. How many of you manage the relationship with PPL? 1. Okay, good. You can keep quiet. So, People's Postcode Lottery. Unusual funder. They're a trust. They're a set of trusts, actually. What's your charity?
Battersea.
Okay, so like when I was at PDSA, so you gain... Yes, there's loads of money in the... Anybody here who works for an animal charity, PPL should be on your radar because they're massive supporters and they love animals and they're very, very good donors towards. I used to work for PDSA, which was why I got to know PPL, and they're unusual. PPL are a trust, but they don't think of themselves or behave like a trust. They behave like a major donor. They want to get to know you. They want to improve a relationship with you. They want you to prosper. They aren't really that bothered about the specifics of what you do. It's about the overall what you do. Esther said she started exactly at the same time as me, which we did. I was furious that Ian Brown here had recruited a head before I arrived. I was convinced I'd have to get rid of her, and she's still here. Esther went early on to see PPL. They give 250,000 as a baseline donation. They give another 100,000 each year, roughly. So they're one of our biggest, in fact, actually our biggest unrestricted donors. So alarm bells should have been ringing there. These are really important people to us. But we treated them exactly as we would treat a trust. We reported quarterly, and then we gave them an annual report. We didn't have any events, strangely enough, for a charity like Whizz-Kidz. We didn't actually have an annual reception. We didn't have engagement events. So they never got invited to anything. But our chief exec and their chief exec got on very well. And as far as I was concerned when I arrived, the relationship was brilliant. Esther went to meet them to make a pitch for some more money, which is what we pay her for. And came back, as we would say in Scotland, with a flea in her ear. She was basically told that we were useless, that at an operational level, we didn't listen, we didn't engage, we didn't seek to involve them, and that a once-a-year report, which showed we'd done the minimum they had asked us to do, was simply not good enough.
I'm usually much better at pitching.
I should say this was the very first pitch she went out to do, and I did get a bit worried when she came back with this message. But there was an important point here. There was two important points here. First of all is trust for you, either with your director or with your staff that are going to do a pitch. Do you believe them when they come back and give you a message that's not welcome? And I've been rather hoping Esther was come back to say, we've got another $500,000, you know, so it's all okay, it's fine, it's great, we've done our target for next year. And instead she came back with a message that said, this isn't good. The second thing was, she had done something which some of us don't do very well, which was she'd listened and written down each point that the donor had made. And I can tell you, it was quite extensive. I think there was about a dozen things that we weren't doing. I think we're only doing about 2 right, but all kinds of things. We weren't engaging with them, we weren't speaking to them, we weren't trying to build a relationship with them. We were delivering the minimum that they had asked us to do. We weren't seeming to excel. And they weren't happy with us. And so Esther came back with that message, and we sat down. I have to say, we did it in a pub round the corner with a bottle of wine. I was nursing my wounds because I thought I was going to get a nice big result just before the first board of trustees that I had to attend. And we sat down and we went through what they had told us. And we decided which of those we thought was fair, which was most of them, and then which of those we could deliver against. And then Esther went back and discussed that with them, but also said, Malcolm and I will come up to Edinburgh and meet you. I think it was like 2 weeks later. Could we come up and see you? Could we sit down and talk about it? And that was the first big breakthrough, was that we wanted to meet them face to face, on their ground, at a time of their choosing, and with the team they wanted to field. I intervened to say we weren't going to meet them in their office, we'd take them to lunch. I like my lunches. But also I wanted them on semi-neutral ground. Edinburgh isn't my natural territory, but I wanted on semi-neutral ground. And we took them out to lunch. There was 2 of them, one of whom has gone on to be our relationship manager and also our Dream Fund manager. The other was their head of charities. I have never worked so hard to get a smile out of someone over lunch. And I did everything. I did the gin and tonics, I did the wine, I did the lovely steak, I did the whole lot. It just
Unfortunately, she's
didn't work.
teetotal.
It took me right to the end of the meal to actually get her to engage. And I realised at that point that Esther was right. We had a problem. And we had to work very hard on this. We had come up with a 9-month plan. Why 9 months? Because rather like with any good fundraiser, we had something in our mind in 9 months, which was we knew a scheme called Dream Fund was opening. Have any of you applied to Dream Fund in the past? 1, 2, 3, 4. Have any of you got through the second stage of Dream Fund in the past? 1, 2. Have any of you ever won Dream Fund? 1. Well done. Nice to be in company with Dream Fund winners. We knew that Dream Fund was coming up and we had a project in our mind. But we knew that if we did not improve our relationship, we wouldn't risk our core funding, but we knew we were going to be in danger of not getting our next funding that we were after. So we came up with a 9-month plan. One of the key things was, Esther made it clear to me, that senior engagement in our charity, not at CEO level, was vital. A director or a senior official had to take ownership of the relationship and be seen to own the relationship by the donor. If we didn't do that, they wouldn't believe we would affect change in that relationship. And Esther informed me that I was that person and that it was on my shoulders. The next thing we did was we got to know who we would be dealing with at PPL. The woman's name was Lisa, absolutely great girl, absolutely wonderful girl. She's gone on to be promoted through over the 2 years that we've been dealing with her. And we did a lot of work to work out what she was like. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she in Edinburgh? Why was she working for PPL? Who was she getting married to? Where did she live? Did she have a dog?
Sounds a wee bit creepy.
All those sort of things. But that allowed us to find a number of touch points with her. And we worked those touch points and built a personal relationship. And if you want to really know about how to turn on or off a major donor, whether it be a trust or a foundation, or whether it's an individual, if you do not know about them and what is important to them, you're really tying your hands behind your back. So we got to know that. We implemented what many of you, if you do major donor trust fundraising, will see as a fairly standard approach. That's what you're meant to do with major donors. You have that list of things and you choose which is right. But we did it with a trust funder. It worked. We applied for something recently and they were our reference. They actually made a point of telling another funder how great we were. We didn't get the money, by the way, but they volunteered to do that at the top level. We've implemented the things they wanted, most of them, not all of them. One or two we still can't do. They don't mind that now. They've seen that we've tried to move towards what they wanted. And interestingly, they have done what you and I always want a major donor to do, which is to open their contact book. If you know PPL, they've been trying to get the law changed on society lotteries. They're very hamstrung by the law that exists. My previous background's in politics, so I volunteered that we would do some political lobbying for them. Esther and I went up to Edinburgh to their very first ever parliamentary reception. There was about 8 people in the room. We were the only charity, the only one of their charities that actually made the point of going to support them. On Monday, Esther and I were in Scotland launching a project that Esther won, funded by the big lottery in Scotland. We've never had a big presence up there. The First Minister launched it. How did we get the First Minister? It was through PPL that did the introductions. They did your classic major donor thing. They opened their address book. They helped us because we were going an extra mile to help them. Chris mentioned earlier that I've had 4 occasions in which I've raised 7-figure sums. Those same basic principles are what I've used on every single occasion. Each of those occasions, they've been new donors. We've never had relationships with them. But on each occasion, it's worked. And I would say, if you have donors that you think, trusts or foundations that you think could give you more, or trusts and foundations with whom you have a difficult relationship, but that are vital to you, think of those menu of items and try and think what might work for some of them.
Malcolm says it much better than I could. So that's a picture of us receiving a cheque for £1 million, and that's really what that work was to do. So what we tried to do was to unlock that relationship to allow us to be in the best position possible to raise that money from that additional fund, and it worked really well. So from 7-figure sums to 4-figure sums, or 3-figure sums, which are just as important to many of you if you run a trust fundraising program. So, I call it the bread and butter of trust fundraising. Those are your annual donors that are giving, £500 up to £15,000, but they're giving you every year and you can rely on them. So when I joined Whizz-Kidz, I was really excited because they had a fantastic Razor's Edge program and it was really well populated and they'd had a long history of trust fundraisers who loved Razor's Edge. So there was loads of details up there. Great, fantastic. There were over 6,000 trust constituents on Razor's Edge. A lot of constituents, right? I'm thinking, great, they've got every trust that's ever existed on there. This is going to be easy. Then I looked at the data in terms of how many of those constituents we talked to a year. 700. So about 12% of what was on that portfolio we actually had communication with. And that 700 was mostly warm donors, a couple of cold and lapsed donors in there. So the review of the data kind of discouraged me slightly. I was thinking, what are we going to do? Why have we got 5,000 donors, essentially, that we're not talking to? Who are they and why are we not talking to them? And what an opportunity to move this forward. And also what I realised was that the team had no acquisition strategy. So I'm sure many of you have a similar programme where you have such a good retention rate with your warm donors that actually all the energy is poured into a kind of monthly programme of cyclical work of reporting, you know, send an update, then 6 months later send a new ask, send an update, send an ask. And that really distracts from acquiring new donors. And so I was trying to think, like, what can we do in order to acquire new donors? We could, with this 5,000, portfolio of 5,000 constituents, we could just do a mass general programme appeal, which lots of charities do. It's quick, it's easy, but it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. It has like an under 1% conversion rate. What is the point in spending our time doing that? I'm not promising I've got a better conversion rate, by the way, yet. So I was thinking, and funnily, we sit at Whizz-Kidz, our desks are next to the IG team. And I overheard them talking about segmenting their audience and segmenting their data. And I was thinking, surely there's something we can do to better understand that huge portfolio we have of cold and lapsed donors, and how can we segment that data in order to better design a programme of appeal. And so I kind of spent some time looking at what IG did and thinking, how can we do this? And so what I understood from IG was you need a rich pool of data. So what individual giving programs do really well is understand and gather data from their donors. Whereas what we had was just a list of trusts' names and their addresses, essentially. We didn't understand our audience. And it's very, having 5,000 constituents, how can you understand your audience? And so the first thing I realised was that we had to do a better job in gathering a data set, and that is a painful task when you have 5,000 constituents, and there is no easy answer. It took us about 50 working days, so we did it across about 3 months of data cleanse, and we went through every constituent and cleansed that data. But to make it easier, because what you need is a uniform set of data in order to come out with an audience that can be segmented. So what we did was we agreed internally within the team. I mean, it wasn't based on anything except like our feeling of what would be right. But we agreed a matrix. So we looked at things like obviously geography, propensity to give, their giving history, who they've given to in the past, what type of theme they give on, and we cleansed all that data. And are they even existing? So we went through 5,000 constituents. We got rid of all the people that don't give anymore. That left us with a pool. With that pool, we looked at, we marked them on this matrix, and we were able to classify them from A to G. A being the most major prospects, able to give upwards of £50,000 and right within our theme of work, down to G, which was, only going to give £500 and may not have an interest in children or disability. So once we had classified them and scored them, we were able to put them into 2 groups. Because obviously we don't want a general appeal to go out to any major prospect sort of in that A, B, C category, even if they're cold. Because they could be researched and you could do a bespoke ask to them. So they were siphoned off. And we were left with 2,000 constituents in our sort of lower level propensity giving. So they were people who could give anything from £500 to, I think our cut-off was 20,000. That's where we kind of sat it. And because our research and data had been so in-depth, we were able to then look at our products that we had internally and identify 3 products, and then again group those 2,000 into 3 in order to select the correct product. Now, Razor's Edge was critical. No one wants to spend hours on a mail merge program on Excel. I don't even know how to do a mail merge program on Excel and Word. And so what we managed to do with support from the IG team and our data support team was to create, I don't know how it works, but a mail merge on Razor's Edge that works. So on Razor's Edge now, with that 2,000 group of constituents, we were able to tick a box and tell it which product to send it to. But not only that, we were able to create a program which understands which geographic region that donor comes from, and therefore adapt and change the text in not only the cover letter but the ask going to the donor, so that in one click of a button you suddenly have, we did 150 a month. We process 150 a month in one day, and they're all bespoke asks for bespoke services in that person's or in that constituent's region. And so we obviously had some trial and error. When we first did it, we segmented the data, which was great, but we still sent non-bespoke asks. We sent generic asks, and maybe in the cover letter we would make some reference to their region, but it didn't really give the returns we wanted, so we then went and adapted and used the Razor's Edge program. So where does that leave us now? That leaves us with 1,800 asks being sent out over 14 months. So this is now going to be an annual program, so we will process around 150 a month. From that 1,800, as of today, we've had 26 wins, which doesn't sound great, but it's more than 1%. It's about 1.4% conversion rate. But the conversion rate's not what's important. What's important is the amount that is raised. So the average gift was 1,700, which doesn't sound that much. But that takes out 2 major donations of 15,000 each. So the program in a month, in a year, has raised just under £80,000, which for us, and that's within the pilot phase as well. So for us, that's fantastic that it's generated 24 new warm contacts, because our retention rate on warm donors is over 80%. So we know that those donors are probably going to be with us for a long time now. We have a 75% retention rate, sorry. And it's also growing. What's great about it is the way that we've worded our proposals and the way that the donations have come back. 50% of them are unrestricted. So 80 grand is great, but 40 grand unrestricted a year is fantastic. And that's within our pilot phase. So we are projecting that next year that the same program is going to raise us 100 grand a year, we hope, and continue to add 30 plus donors into our warm pool, and therefore combat this drop-off that we were having in our warm pool, which was seeing our steady income decline. Because actually you would think that the steady income was declining because you had major grants, coming to an end, etc. It wasn't. It's declining in that small to medium group because we were doing no acquisition. So by trying to apply this audience data segmentation approach that you see in IG, we have managed to build an acquisition program that we are going to continue over the years, and hopefully will see us keep that pool of warm donors buoyant.
ROI?
Oh, the ROI, did I write the ROI down? Oh yes, I did. So based on cost to deliver the program, so obviously the data cleanse is expensive. It's 50 full days of staff time, and you need somebody that understands research and can adequately. We found that it's not an administrator post job. You really need your fundraisers to be doing this. Also, it makes them understand better about the portfolio. But once you've done the data cleanse, the actual cost to deliver the program is low. So next year it will cost us £4,000 to deliver that program. And that's based on 1 day a month of one low-level staff member. So the ROI is, for every pound spent, we raise £17.25, which for trust fundraising isn't a bad ROI. That's actually better than our overall ROI at Whizz-Kidz for the trust program, which is around £14 raised per pound spent. So we're really delighted, and I know it's not the sexy part of trust fundraising, but it's the essential part of our trust program in today's market. If you want to keep your trust programs buoyant, you need to look at acquisition. We're done. If anyone has any questions.
I think we've got about 15, 20 minutes of questions. Do you want the microphone she threw away?
Yes, please.
Sorry about that.
So, we traditionally thank our speakers with
Hey.
alcohol, so thank you very much.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we put one of these bottles back in as a little raffle on the way out, and Esther and I will share that back in the office.
Oh.
So how about two? That's a first.
It's not working, is it? Hi.
Oh, I've muted it. Press the mute button.
You're so clever.
You did that by throwing it away.
I've just got good eyesight.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. That's really generous indeed, thank you. Do we have any questions for the speakers?
Oh, I can just talk loudly. Yes, obviously it sounds. Oh, I don't like that. It sounds like it's. No, never mind. I'm going to mute it.
Just shout.
Press the mute button.
Just shout.
Yeah, I just wondered in terms of obviously you had those 5,000 donors that you're working with.
Yeah.
In terms of making this sustainable over the long term, what prospect research have you put in place to support it so that? Because obviously you've done those 5,000 now, you need the next 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, I still think we have probably quite a lot of mileage in that 5,000,
Okay.
given that we've only won 24 of them over. But we do subscribe to, your standard new trust update, etc. So we do have a program of prospect research on new trusts coming into the market, and we generally have a 12-month lapse period. So we know that when trusts register, they're really not ready to give. So we will usually do it a year behind. So a year from now, we will be applying to the trust that came online now. So that's generally at the moment to generate new leads. But I expect, I've got a great trust manager who isn't a fundraiser at all. He's an ex-Italian politician. How's that for a job leap? But he has a very analytical approach to trust fundraising. And he will continue to tweak this program in order to get more out of that group of 5,000, because I don't think we want to stop at 24 is not enough. So we'll keep going with them. But yeah, new trust update is really where we get the majority of our new leads.
I think the other thing just to say on that is, we wouldn't like you to think that Whizz-Kidz raises $350,000 from PPL and 80,000 from this programme. That's it.
Oh.
It's 2.3 million comes in from trusts in a year. So we've given you both the ends. In the middle,
Yeah.
one of our big lessons that we are taking the organisation on a learning curve on is to rather think differently. There was an approach when Esther and I both arrived that if you wrote to Wilson with a very nicely worded and very well thought out pitch, and Wilson came back and said bugger off, that we buggered off and we just sort of went, okay, fine, we'll go back in 2 years and we'll ask them for the same thing again, or they didn't like clubs, so we'll ask for campus next time, or whatever it was. We've started a really serious programme of trying to understand why someone has said no, because we think they should say yes, and changing the way we talk to try and meet what they want to hear. And quite a lot of the time, it's that change that is what is needed. So we talk, I mean, I'll give a little example. It's not specifically trust, but if I can give you this as an example. When I arrived, we have something called the Kids Board. So we have a group of 12 young wheelchair users from across the UK who meet three or four times a year, and in theory drive forward the charity's agenda. It doesn't really, or it didn't really. And it costs about £20,000 a year, which is a core cost, which is quite high. We run on almost no reserves at Whizz-Kidz, you might be surprised to hear. Our free reserves are under 2 months running costs. So there's no room for trial and error here. You have to get it right. So £20,000 a year is a big ask for a charity. And I was asked, could you get some money in to cover the Kids Board? And I looked at it and I said, no. I said, there's 12 kids, 20,000 quid a year. There's no end result. It's not like we're saying we'll put them into a job or we'll have done something different. There's no way we'll do that. But Esther and my deputy now and I sat down and looked carefully at what we did, and we said, could it be knowledge? Could we sell knowledge of the Kids Board? And we happened to have a relationship with Barratt, the home builders. And we met their chairman and we said, look, your big developments are limited by law on the buildings and accessibility, but not the public spaces. So actually, the kids in wheelchairs can get into your building, but can they actually get across to the building? How about we do a nationwide survey for you, and we'll go in and we'll test it. And you give us 10 grand to do that. and then you give us a result, you give us an event at which you bring your suppliers along, and we get to pitch to them and tell them about what we do and what the results were. And they said yes, and we're doing it, we'll unveil the results in December. But that's what we've been doing with some of our medium level trusts. What are they wanting? Can we talk differently? Can we sell our knowledge? Can we explain it in a different way? Can we perhaps adjust our programs? It's not necessarily changing what you do, it's changing the way you talk about yourself and changing what you tell others that you do. And often, that's been our biggest challenge with some of our people internally, has been to get them out and say, can we have £20,000 for the kids board, please? Instead of saying, what could the kids board do that we could sell and get the results in? So, one of the big things that Esther and her team have been really good at is challenging us to think about, here's a charity, here's a trust that won't support what we currently do. How could we get them on board? What could we say differently? What could we act differently? And could we give it a try? And that's what one of the big changes that Esther and her team have really brought in over the last few years. So don't just assume a no is a no. A no is a not yet.
Just on the no is a no, often we don't get a no, we just get
nothing.
So how do we move that forward when they just say, oh, we had so many applications, so sorry?
We started a rule that if they said no...
So the question was, if you don't even get a no, you just don't get a no response, what do you do?
So we started, when we cleansed the data, that was one of the issues. We had been applying to people for 10, 11, 12 years and getting absolutely nothing back. So when we cleansed the data, it was helpful because we were able to see that the reason we were getting a no back might be that we just are not hitting some of their key criteria, or that they're actually their main concern and priorities are quite far away from what we do. And so we did apply a rule that if they said no for over 6 years in a row, they were archived. And we've put a razor's edge action to research in 3 years' time to see if anything has changed. But I think you're right, that you do have to at some point reduce your pools so that you have a more concentrated group of audience to do something with, and you're better starting with the ones that are at least slightly interested and not the ones that are just a complete brick wall.
But do go back to them. We had one just the other day, didn't we?
Did we?
The 15,000.
Oh yeah.
That we
yes, that's
asked
true.
Continually for 6 years, 8 years.
Yeah, so actually the cold mail out programme that I talked about, one of the big successes last week, a 15 grand donation, and we'd been to them 4 times. So they got through because we'd only asked 4 times and they said no every time. But with the more bespoke ask, the regional information, we're lucky at Whizz-Kidz. We can pull things like, in your region there are X number of children on the waiting list. We need to buy X number of wheelchairs. Like, who doesn't love that kind of ask? It's harder for a charity that doesn't have a capital ask. But the donation that they gave, the way that it was worded, meant it's an unrestricted donation because they just said, we would like to donate to your services. Great, unrestricted, thank you. So again, it's about, we try to be clever about the way we word our asks and never ask for specifics if we can.
One more question.
Sorry, hi. Going back to PPL, I was a little bit curious. You mentioned something about we did what they asked, but not quite everything. We left what they asked quite vague. And you were able to share some of what it is they asked and what you were actually able to do?
Yeah, so anybody who's PPL funded will probably understand some of these, but it's probably worth doing just to think about other funders you might have. So what did PPL tell us that we weren't doing? Now, I think there was 11 or 12 items. Now, I can't remember them a year and a half later, all of them, but I'll tell you some of them. They wanted media hits. That's what PPL want. We're a marketing tool for PPL. We understand that. That is part of their business model. And we've got no qualms about that. Within the funding agreement, I think they said they wanted 8 hits. 12 hits a year. Okay?
Yeah, 1 a month.
And we were delivering them about 12 hits a year. And they were saying, you're not listening to us. That's the minimum we want from you. Not what we want from you. So find better ways of giving us media hits. Secondly, find us a way where our staff can engage with what you do. Our staff are in Edinburgh, your office is in London. You don't have regional offices. Find a way so our staff feel good about you. Third, and this is the one we've failed on, anybody wants to help me on this, please feel free. PPL like competitions for the players. Players are C2, D and E, social groupings. They wanted things that appealed to them. We've completely failed. We don't have a big pool of celebrities. We don't have, the McLarens of this world as corporate supporters. We've really struggled, but we listened. They wanted competitions, and we worked hard to try and find some. It just didn't work.
I mean, we stalled them for a while with some ideas.
Well, we tried things. We went to Adam and Katie Rickett and we talked about, could you do a sort of master class in cocktail making, and because they were going to do a programme on that, and they said yes. It just never quite worked. They said, you do not have an event at which our senior staff can come and hear what you do. So we said, right, how about an annual reception? I'll get a speaker's house, I said, without quite thinking about what I was doing. And we'll have an annual reception. And luckily we got speaker's house, and we had our first annual reception last year, and I think it was 4 of them, director level and the chief exec, came to it and loved it. And next 2 weeks' time we're in Lambeth Palace doing exactly the same. But we listened to them. And there was one...
Chief exec.
Oh yes, they said we have 2 things a year. We have a ball in Edinburgh in January, when we invite all our family to come and have a great time. And we have a 2-day charity occasion during the summer. And your chief exec never comes. And your chief exec must come. And our chief exec's in a wheelchair and hates Edinburgh because it's very inaccessible. And I had to use, Esther told me, you better deliver her. She better be there. Now, the ball was easy because I said there might be £1 million in it, but we need you there to get it. The charity day was much more difficult, but she went this year. And we had to decide which were the points I was going to use my credibility with my chief exec to make her do something she didn't want to do. And that's really important with a big funder, or a funder that has potential. It doesn't just need to be a big funder. It's one you think has got potential. You have to decide when do you go to your director, your chief exec, your chairman of the board, whoever it is, and use your credibility to make something happen. I've got a problem because my chief exec doesn't want to go to Edinburgh next year for the ball because she's not getting another £1 million. So I've got to convince her that actually she's going, and I've probably got to go literally and wheel her there myself. But I'll do it because they're my biggest funder now. They're my most important partnership. So if I have to take Ruth and force her to go on the train and actually wheel her there myself, I'll go and do it because they're my biggest funder. I need them on board.
Plus there's free champagne.
It's a great event. If you're invited to go, great event. Absolutely brilliant.
No brainer.
Brilliant. You don't have to do anything, you just have to eat and drink. There was one more question.
One more question?
2 behind it.
Thank you.
Hi, for smaller charitable trusts, how do you sort of initiate those conversations, especially if they're told to you? And then also, how do you steward them? Just because I think traditionally they can be a bit less communicative and you actually start those conversations.
So I always think that personal communication is better, but with a group of 5,000, how do you even start to work out who to pick up the phone to and who not to? So with that group that I described, we have not had phone call communication with any of them. From our side, strangely, the number of emails and phone calls we receive has increased like tenfold since we have started the bespoke mail out programme, because those funders now think, they don't feel like they're at the end of a general appeal, they feel like they're at the end of a bespoke ask designed for them. It's also very helpful that one of our fundraisers is an ex-beneficiary and received a wheelchair from us, and all of our letters are written by her, not by her, but they're signed by her and from her, and that adds a very nice personal touch. So it's trying to do those cost-effective, time-effective things that mean that you still create a feeling for that trust, that there is a personal connection. And then once a new trust comes on board, we do the standard thank you letter. We try to do a thank you call. There's only 24 of them this year that we've acquired, so we will try to do a personal thank you call and a thank you letter. And then we just do the general cycle of updates until it probably takes us a couple of years to work out the worth of that trust and whether or not they are worth pursuing as a major, with the uplift potential. So most of our trusts are giving sort of £1,000 when they come in. Obviously we had those 2 random huge donations which make it worthwhile. But those ones that give 1,000, some of them could give way more. But it'll take us a couple of years of once they go into the warm pile, they go into bespoke asks. So next year, all of those that have come on will have a canvasser assigned to them and have a much more personal supporter journey. I mean, it's only really 2 contact points a year and a Christmas card.
Can I just say on that one as well? I've worked for a whole variety of charities over the years, and I used to work. One of the things we were talking about was whether or not we should talk about the fact that Esther mentioned that the small donor program goes up to 20,000. I can tell you in one of the charities I used to work for, it went up to 2,000. A major donor was counted as £400. Okay, so it's the same thing. It just changes depending on your income. One of the things that we used to do when we were looking for relatively small, I think the charity was looking for like 350,000, 400,000 pounds a year to maintain its existence. One of the things we used to do was, on a rolling programme over about 18 months, we used to select the trusts and the donors as well, and funnily enough the families of legacy donors as well. So where we'd had a will that said, to my son of 27 Marsh Terrace I leave, the cat. We would keep those on file, and then on a rolling programme, we would do a personal card to that person, just saying, I know it's a year since you last gave us money, or it's 18 months since you kindly supported us. We never actually said gave us money. Kindly supported us. We just thought you'd like to know, we've seen, it was a cancer charity, it was a small cancer charity in London. We've been able to see X number of people, and we've introduced this new service, and here's a photograph of what your money helped pay for. Thank you ever so much. Yours sincerely. And we do like 6 of them a month. It used to be a sort of, when I had a hangover, I used to do it in the morning, so I used to sort of sit there and just write out the card. And we would just print off some photographs and send it to them. The response was amazing. Not immediately, usually, but over a period of about 9 to 12 months. And I think it was because people felt you had gone slightly beyond what they'd expected. And I think with a lot of stuff, that is what it is. Have you gone just a little bit more than that check warranted? And that's how you build, that's how we build a great deal of a relationship, where you were on a smaller scale. But it's the same thing as what we were saying with PPL. It's exactly the same thing. It's just a concertina of different effect.
Well, a round of applause for our speakers tonight. That was really great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. So next Thursday, our November 1st Thursday, will be delivered by our very own Julie Roberts. I hardly know her. Back, one of our committee members, and she'll be presenting on how to transform your approach to sustainable fundraising in 3 simple steps: understand, listen, and resonate. Now, just one final thing for you. Please do pick up your glasses. The last lot in here were terrible. And take us to the bar for me, please. There's food at the back. Please enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for coming.